Oftentimes, because of kids' behaviors, families feel like, oh my God, my kid's out of control. Like, we don't know what to do. We don't know how to handle them. And that's where we step in to help the kid, identify their feelings, or identify their triggers, or identify those support networks, so they know, like, if I'm feeling this way, this is going to happen and I need to do this.
Hello, and welcome back to You Need a Counselor podcast. My name is Dr. Julie Johnson. I'm the president and founder here at Heart and Solutions. We are still doing telehealth sessions for anybody in Iowa for our outpatient mental health counseling services for children, adults, adolescents, couples, families. We're also doing our in-office mental health therapy services and our in-school mental health therapy services as well.
And I'm Chrissa. I am the vice president at Heart and Solutions in charge of our BHIS department. So BHIS stands for Behavioral Health Intervention Services, and that is the program where we go in home and work with children ages 4 through 18 on different behavioral skills with the child and their whole family. We can also see clients telehealth, like Julie said, or in the school or in our office as well. And this is our podcast, You Need a Counselor. So we are designed for people curious about counseling, but have barriers keeping them from experiencing the benefits of counseling. Our mission is to share stories about counseling, good, bad, and indifferent, and spread the message that everyone can benefit from mental health and behavioral health counseling services.
We post every Sunday night at 5 p.m. Central. So we always recommend just batch up whatever task you hate doing. Putting away laundry. I will tell you, I did not put away laundry this past Sunday, and then I paid for it yesterday because I was on the way out the door digging through clothes, just trying to figure out an outfit to wear. And so putting those outfits together on Sunday nights, huge time saver. Really, really great. Definitely miss it when I don't do it. Also, walking on the treadmill. Put us on while you walk on the treadmill. Put us on while you meal prep for the week. When I don't meal prep for the week, I have nothing to eat. It's a bad week. Okay. So we recommend set a date with us, do some task you hate doing while you listen to the show. And then that gives you the entire week to get in contact with your counselor, to get scheduled, or to get in touch with any of our awesome guests from that week. So today we have a very special guest. We have Lexxis Onken today here with us. Welcome, Lexxis.
Thank you.
So Lexxis is one of our very own BHIS counselors, behavioral health intervention counselors in our Cedar Rapids office location. Lexxis also graduated from my alma mater, UNI, University of Northern Iowa, in the social work program there, and has a trauma-informed background in social work. So we're really excited because Lexxis is really focusing right now. She's studying to get her license so that she can practice outpatient mental health therapy here at Heart and Solutions. She also has just a very broad background of different experiences within this field. So working with children, working with adults, working with individuals on the autism spectrum, and from all different backgrounds. So really, really rich kind of background and experience in the field. And then also, Lexxis definitely has a soft spot for those clients that some people might consider the tougher clients or the harder clients to work with. Those are Lexxis's pride and joy, getting to work with those clients. So I think that always, to me, takes a very special individual, takes a very, very patient and kind heart. And I think that you guys will experience that here in our discussion with Lexxis today. So welcome, Lexxis. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yes. So we call her Lexi sometimes, but you can call her Lexxis as well. So I'm always curious because you've got all of this experience in the field. What is it that drew you to wanting to become a social worker in the first place?
So when I first started school, I wanted to do criminal justice. I was like, there's a lot of my aim at
Really?
that time was troubled youth because I was like, there's a connection that's not missing. But for me, I've always battled with my own mental health issues growing up with a single parent. And aside from like my mom and my immediate friends, like I didn't have that support person to go to when I was a kid. So I grew up in a really small town in Minnesota and we had limited resources. And besides like my school counselor or, just those immediate people, like I didn't have anybody. So my motto has kind of always been to be that person to others that I didn't have when I was a kid. So it was a shift just because criminal justice to social work are obviously like two completely different ball games.
Mhm.
But once I had a conversation with a professor at Kirkwood on what my aim was, he was like, I really think you would benefit more from human services, social work, and then, that still gives you the ability to tie in those more challenging clients or those delinquent clients and stuff like that. So yeah, that's just kind of been my aim. It took me a long ways to figure out what I wanted to do, but I think it was a good choice.
Absolutely. That's my background too. And we actually just interviewed Simone, who also started out wanting to work in criminal justice. So just really, really cool how and Brittany too, right? Wanted to be
Yeah,
a
I
parole
think so.
officer.
Yes.
Um and so it's just so interesting to me because I started out my bachelor's or I did my bachelor's in criminal justice. And I thought I wanted to be an attorney. And at some point in my life, I may be an attorney. We'll see
Just
where this
that.
life takes us. But what I found was that as I was doing this study, I was like, there are kind of two sides of this equation, right? There's the punitive criminal justice side of things. And then there is the healing, restorative prevention side of things. And the two seemed so at odds sometimes as I was learning about these systems. And I just thought, I've got to pick a side here.
Yeah.
And that's when I got my master's, was because I said, I want to be on that prevention side. I want to be on that rehabilitation side of things and not on the, punitive aftermath side of the equation.
Yeah.
So it's so interesting that you had that same start. So you had a great counseling experience, you had a bad counseling experience, and you are a counselor. And I'm
Yeah.
always excited to hear about the bad counseling experiences, especially.
Yes.
Can you tell us about those experiences and how that kind of formed who you are as a counselor now?
Yeah, so growing up, like I said, in a really small town in Minnesota, we had like 20,000 people was like our population. And so, being a low income family and being on Medicaid, like that even dwindled resources even more. And so oftentimes, like for myself, I probably didn't get into therapy until I was in my teen years outside of like the school counselor and stuff. But I discovered that like resources were limited. When I moved to Iowa, in 2015, I got sent to one of our local agencies for therapy and had a really good connection with that therapist. Well, then they had this like walk-in basis, but I just thought like, oh, I've been going to sessions and I'm better now. Like I don't need to go anymore. And then when I went to try and go back to her, she was gone.
Mm.
And so I was like distraught because I was like, oh my God, like this person that I connected with is now gone. So like, what do I do? And that definitely hindered my ability to want to find a different counselor. I knew I needed it, but I was like, where do I even start? Like that one person I had a connection with is no longer here. And so I would say that was probably the bad experience just because like I was beside myself. Like I didn't know what to do. So then I started doing, I do psychiatry for my own mental health and got sent to the U of I for psychiatry. And they said, I think these types of therapists or therapy techniques would be super beneficial for you. So I started looking into my own, research, reaching out on Facebook, does anybody know of somebody that specializes in X, Y, and Z, and got sent to a therapist that I was with for I think I was with her for 2 years. And she was an owner of the company. Well, then she decided she was going to the business side of the company. So then I again had to find a new therapist. And so it's hard when you've been bounced around from therapist to therapist. And sometimes that's nobody's fault, but that's just how the cards lay out. But it's really hard to gain that connection when that relationship piece is so critical to you. Because you don't just bond with anybody. And I've realized now that I went through school, like, you have the right to say, hey, like, that person's not a good fit for me. And so now I'm back into having a therapist that I'm very thankful that I found, just because I feel like going to therapy is honestly what keeps me sane in my work life and like my everyday life. Like, I need to go to therapy.
That's awesome. So in those in-between experiences where you had to switch to a different counselor, how did you start that relationship building process with that new person?
I think going from the one that I had here that was consistent to the one that I have now, I definitely took characteristics and attributes that therapist had and was open and honest with my current one and was like, this is what I need. My previous therapist would like interject during conversation and hold me accountable instead of just letting me ramble. And for me, that was like that turning point of like, oh, like somebody hears the nonsense that I'm saying and needs to call me out on it. So I was open and honest with my current therapist. And shortly after I started seeing her, she went on maternity leave. So then I got put with another one in the office, she's equally incredible. But I was just open and honest about my needs of, hey, like, we've tried this before, it don't work. We've tried this approach before, it don't work. Or we've tried these approaches and they work very well. So I've just learned to be accountable on my own end, but like, if I don't tell people, they're not going to know. So just being open and honest about what I need and what's most beneficial for me.
Okay. So then you talked about also like working with kids and adults on the spectrum too. Do you want to talk more about that and what is your other position? So we did mention Lexxis is a BHIS counselor here, but she has another part-time position as well with adults, correct, on the spectrum?
Yep. So when I first moved here, I started working at Four Oaks, and I had a professor at Kirkwood that I became really close with, and she's still a mentor in my life. And she said, oh, I work at the autism program through Four Oaks. And eventually Four Oaks is, I just needed a change. I just needed a break from my current position at that time. And she was like, we have an opening in the autism program. And I was like, her name was Monica. And I said, Monica, I have no experience with kids on the spectrum. Like, I have no idea. And she was like, well, if you're willing to learn, because they're all, they're all different, then I'm willing to take you under my wing. So I was in that program for 6 or 7 months, I think. And unfortunately they got cut due to funding. But then when I continued my time at Four Oaks, oftentimes it was the kids on the spectrum that I bonded well with. And it was just, I learned quickly that most of the time they just wanted somebody to listen to. And I know how that feels. So I just listened. And so I often would get kids that would be, like, go talk to Lexxis, go talk to Lexxis. Like, they just kind of got pushed my direction. And I was okay with that. And then when I was at Four Oaks, I also did part-time work at the ARC here in Cedar Rapids. So I did in-home goal services with clients and had a lot of the more what we would consider difficult clients that got sent to me because they knew about my background. And so I've just generally, the disability population in general, I've always had a passion for, but kids on the spectrum just fascinate me because they're just like a wealth of like information. And since 2016, I believe, I've worked with a little girl on Sundays doing respite with her and going to church. And that was mom's strict guidelines, was like, we need a provider that knows about autism. And I still have her through private pay. It'll be 5 years, I believe, in October. So so my current position, my other position, I work with adults with intellectual disabilities that are in a group home setting. So it's 24/7 care, and they have goals that they work on, whether it be, learning how to do hygiene or learning how to use their manners. Like it varies client to client, but the house that I'm in currently is for 5 females, all with an intellectual disability, more or less autism. And so it's challenging. Some days I'm mentally and emotionally exhausting because it's a lot. But then I take into account that like they need people too. And so that relationship piece again plays in huge there because like they gain connections with people, most of the time people on the spectrum do hold relationships near and dear to their heart. And so for me, that's been like going to that job is kind of just like I'm going to my second house because it's in a house, like you sleep there, you eat there, you do everything there. And so yeah, it's been a journey, that's for sure. But it's every day something new, and every day you're reminded why you work in that field or why you work in this field in general.
That's awesome. You sound super busy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool.
I think in order to do all of that, to be just giving of yourself all the time in all your different roles, it's so important that you're also taking care of yourself and also taking care of your own mental health, because
Yep.
gosh, I mean, the ability to be able to be giving all the time in the way that you are, it takes a lot of strength, and it takes a lot of that ability to have that for ourselves as well.
Yeah.
So I love what a role model you are too, in terms of being able to say, yeah, I am a counselor, I am a support person, I do respite care, but I have a counselor too, because
Yeah.
I need to in order to be able to give of myself so
Yeah.
freely in my life.
Yeah, it's definitely been helpful. I wouldn't be sane. I wholeheartedly believe that I would not be sane without going to see a counselor.
Same. For sure. I mean, gosh, it's so important, and I think in this field, especially, but really in any field, it's
Yeah.
so important to be able to do that, because sometimes we think about the helping profession. We think, okay, well, we're you know we're giving to others, we're giving of ourselves to others, we're helping others, but really, I mean, if we work in a factory, we're giving of ourselves to others, we're helping
Right.
others, and so in any field that we're in, retail, anything, if we are at our best and we are at our most healthy, then we're able to give of ourselves in whatever field that
Yeah.
we're in. Wow. So can you tell us more about, so we've brought up the autism spectrum a bit here. Can you share more with us about what that means? Because some of our listeners might be going, I kind of know what that means, right? Can you kind of share that with us?
Yeah, so I mean, I truthfully don't know the exact I know about autism, but wholeheartedly I don't know the specifics and the ins and outs, but the best explanation I can give is that their brain just truly functions different than ours. Whether that be behavioral, some have issues with potty training until late on in their life. Some have issues understanding sarcasm or when things are funny. And so that's honestly the best explanation is their brains are wired differently, which is okay. And that's great. But I've learned when I first started in the autism program that when I was at Four Oaks, that sometimes you really just have to get on their level, even though it might not make sense, but that's just how you're going to connect with them. I mean, I've had kids that were fascinated with electronics and vacuums and just the most bizarre things. And it's not the item itself, but it's the components that make up the item as to why it is the way that it is. So with autism, there's, nonverbal, which they don't talk, they don't communicate. They do to a point, they can say, specific words that their family might understand or that their school might understand, but having full on sentences, they don't know. I wouldn't say they don't know how to do it, but they don't do it. And then you have some that they fully communicate. At my other job, we have 5 total in our house, and 2 of them need assistance with everyday tasks, and 3 of them follow a schedule. So in the autism population, a schedule is very critical and crucial for them to understand what's going on now and what's going on next. It's that transition component that they really struggle with. So for us, we just know, like, we wake up, we brush our teeth, we go to the bathroom, so on and so forth. But for them, it's like their brain doesn't necessarily prompt them on what to do next. Like they don't know what their next task is. And so that's where that visual component of like, okay, you do this at this time, this at this time. And that could be as simple as like a pull away chart, like this is your to do side and this is your done side. But for my girls at my other job, like that, that works very well. I mean, some days they use it, some days they don't, but overall, that's what they need to be successful throughout the day.
I love that. I love how you're talking about, that spectrum, and it is such a wide spectrum of differences within individuals. And I also loved what you said about you're so strength based. I love what you said about like these kiddos are a wealth of information,
Mhm.
like an encyclopedia on whatever topic is of interest, right?
Yep.
And I think of one kiddo, not a client, right, but that Chrissa and I know. And oh my gosh, this kid would tell you like all the different flavors of a certain candy, right? He'd tell you like every character in a video game or in a
Yeah.
comic series or like in great detail. And it was like he had it in front of him reading
Yeah.
it, right? But he's just
Yep.
saying it. And you'd be
Yeah.
like, how are you doing that?
Right.
And so I just think it's so it is in that way, it's such a superpower sometimes
It
because it's
is.
like, oh my gosh, like I could not tell you every, character in a series, or I could not tell you every piece of a vacuum cleaner or how a
Yeah.
toaster works. Like I
Mhm.
don't know. Like
Yeah.
my brain just doesn't do that. But having that ability and then being able to use that ability
Mhm.
for good is just is amazing, so I think that that's just wonderful, just being able to say like, yeah, we all have our superpowers,
Mhm.
and for some people like that's one, and that's amazing to me. And being able to the schedule thing, I always think is great because like I don't personally, like my brain also doesn't know what to do in the morning. Like I wake up early in the morning and like I don't know what to do. I'll like stand in the
Right.
kitchen, stand there. And so I have a daily list also,
Yeah.
and it'll be like put on hot water now, like you know what I mean? Eat breakfast, brush your teeth, because otherwise I won't do it. Like I'll just
Yeah.
like I'll find other things to distract myself, right? So I
Yep.
love that technique for anybody.
Yeah.
It's so helpful to be able to have that list and know what I've done, what I need to do, and then our minds are freed up for other more interesting things, like
Yep.
the vacuum cleaner. I mean,
Yeah.
really, yeah. Wow. So it sounds like most of your counseling experiences were here in Iowa, which is great because
Yeah.
Iowa doesn't always have as many counselors available as maybe other states. I grew up in Massachusetts, and there's like a counselor on every block, right? But
Right.
in Iowa, we're so spread out. So I love that you were able to get connected to counselors, and that even after a counselor transition for some reason, you were still able to build that counseling relationship back up
Yeah.
with a new person. That's really hard to do.
It was definitely.
What would you say your favorite part about the behavioral health intervention counseling? Well, actually, can you tell us a little bit about what that is? And then what are
Yes.
some of your favorite parts about doing that?
So we provide services in home, and like Julie said, in schools to kids that have behaviors. That can look like not accepting the word no to punching your brother because he made you upset. I mean, there's multiple different behaviors that I've seen. Sometimes they're just mind blowing because you're like, why is this happening? But we provide services and skills and interventions for kids to work as a family, or not kids, but families to work as a family. Oftentimes, because of kids' behaviors, families feel like, oh my God, my kid's out of control. Like we don't know what to do. We don't know how to handle them. And that's where we step in to help the kid, identify their feelings or identify their triggers or identify those support networks. So they know like, if I'm feeling this way, this is going to happen and I need to do this. And then with the family aspect, that's a way for the parents and the families, not even all the time parents, but just guardians in general, to work with the kid to get them back from 100 to 0 instead of going from 0 to 100. So as far as favorite, I can't necessarily say I have a favorite just because like the spectrum of what I've done and what I've seen be done is just so like it's so wide, but I definitely like just being creative and kind of letting the kids do things as they want. As far as like, if you're doing an activity or a game and they're not playing it correctly, I mean, what difference does it make? If they're making it up and going along with how they want to, it's okay. Like I've learned that you really just have to let kids be kids. Kids have enough problems and stressors in their life as far as in school or, bullies and stuff like that. And just letting them be a kid and just showing them that like, it's okay to be silly and it's okay to be goofy. And it's okay to feel that the way you feel is incredibly important, just because if you don't allow that, then I almost guarantee like you're not going to get anywhere. You're going to be right back to that kid shutting down, that kid refusing, and that kid not wanting to do anything, period. That happens. I have a few kids right now that are challenging and difficult, and sometimes you walk in prepared and it doesn't go that way and you just kind of have to play it out. I've learned that you just don't power struggle with kids or people in general, because you're not going to get anywhere and it's not going to make you sleep any better at night. So why just let it be how it is? I mean, obviously limit, safety concerns is obviously a thing, but if they're just blatantly refusing, I mean, you can try, but I mean, there's nothing you can do. So you just continue to try and build that relationship and understand that they have bad days just like we do.
What are some of your favorite session activities that you've done with kids?
I would say, so my younger, like I have some that really like being crafty and creative and some that really don't. So, in first, like one of the first few sessions with a few of my, more so my female clients, the boys really didn't really connect with it much, but we did like a when I'm angry, I can, and it was a board full of different coping skills. So I just went on Google and found like coping skills as in like the word form, and then use those to Google pictures of what those look like. And then the kid was able to pick like, I like to pet my dog, or, I like to play with a fidget spinner. And then we just made like a collage, which you can do with magazines and stuff too, but I didn't have magazines at that time. So I just made do with what I had. But that's one of my favorites, just because you just really get to see that creativity side and that the effort that they put into it, but more so like, does that, are they going to take it seriously or not? Like sometimes they might not, and sometimes they might. But I also like to do one that you cut out like headings that say I am, I'm not, and I want to be. And then you print out some like attributes and characteristics, and then they decide like, am I funny? Am I not funny? Or do I want to be funny? And then there's like 100 different characteristics I have. And then at the end, they choose in the I am category, like which one's the easiest for them to be. In the I'm not, which one are they super thankful they're not? And then in the I want to be, like, which one do they really strive to be more of?
Yeah, I love that about BHIS. People always ask like what your favorite part is. And I like like you said, you're just being creative and like doing games with kids all day or at crafts with kids all day. And
Yeah.
I mean, you're doing work too, you're working on those skills, but like
Yeah.
from the outside perspective, you're literally sitting there like making a collage or playing Uno or whatever with the kids.
It's crazy how many games I've learned that actually have like some therapeutic component some way or another behind them. Like I mean, and quite honestly, you can make things as they are. I mean, Google, I've seen lots of stuff on Google. But it's crazy how the games they were never made for that, but they definitely can be used for that.
Yeah, I just did an orientation last week and they were asking something about like how do you know what to do in your session or what do you do before a session? And I was like, well, eventually you're just gonna be able to wing it. Like now you're at the point where you can just like take a game and bring it to a session and be able to turn it into a skill without I don't know, prepping beforehand, but definitely I remember at the
Yeah.
beginning having to like Pinterest look up all that stuff beforehand.
Yeah, I definitely just like print out a bunch of worksheets, or like there's a website that has like feelings puzzles and like crosswords and stuff, just because I know like if I have a worksheet planned and the kid's just not having it, I'll try like a funner activity like the worksheet, because that way we're still working on something, but it's just not them feeling like, oh my God, like I'm in school again,
Mhm.
and or if we're not getting anywhere at all, like, hey, what game do you want to play? Like, again, that's that relationship piece that you're continuing to try and build. And if a kid's already upset and had a bad day, like you're more than likely not going to get very far.
Mhm.
Yeah, that relationship piece is so important. And you've kind of brought it up a couple times here, even in this conversation. I think that really just speaks to how important that is. Being able to develop those therapeutic relationships, because it doesn't come easily to some
No.
people, like there are some people. My daughter is going to be 6, and I don't know where she gets this from. 'Cause it's not from me, but like she just like makes friends everywhere she goes. Okay. And I'm always like, how are you doing that? Okay. Because it doesn't come naturally to everybody, right? So
Yeah.
sometimes it's because of traumatic experiences, sometimes it's because of relational challenges, right? Sometimes
Mhm.
it's just because we are introverted, we're more comfortable by ourselves.
Right.
And so there's all these different reasons, and they don't necessarily have to be positive or negative. They're just who we are.
Yeah.
But building relationships are so different for different people. My parents will make friends in the bathroom at a play. Like they will like be in line for the bathroom, and they'll come back and be like, "This is so and so. We're gonna go get drinks after." And I'm like, "Okay." Right? Like, and then for other people, it takes time. It takes time
Right.
to build that trust up. And so that's why I think it is so important. I think you're highlighting that, to build that trust and to
Yeah.
not have that adversarial relationship, especially when we're working with any child,
Yeah.
because it is so easy to get into a power dynamic with a child, because I'm an adult, you're a child, right? So that's already kind of built in. And
Hmm.
then, like what you said, getting on their level, right? Putting ourselves on the child's level so that there's more equality in that
Hmm.
relationship than, well, you're a teacher, or you're, a parent, or somebody else that I need to have a power dynamic
Hmm.
with. I think that's awesome. And like you said, kids get that all day long.
Yeah.
Like they're told what to do from the moment they get up to the moment they go to bed. And sometimes that session time is the only time in their
Yeah.
day that they
Yeah.
can do what they want to do freely.
I've definitely learned too that oftentimes, like, some kids like just want to show a different person something. Like, I have two boys that have their brothers, and they've mastered like doing these flips on the trampoline, which is phenomenal. And they love showing me, like, they love showing me that they can now land it, or that they can do it twice, or whatever the case may be. But it's different because it's not mom and dad. Mom and dad can see them do it all day. But that moment someone steps into their house, they're like, oh, I've learned this skill and I can show them. And just being receptive to that and not being like, nope, I have this plan. Obviously you want to get what you have planned done, but if they want to show you something on the trampoline, take 10 minutes and let them show you on the trampoline.
Yeah, I think a lot of times, yeah, like you said, it's just showing someone else or getting that positive attention from
Yeah,
another
that positive
person.
feedback from somebody that's outside of immediate family.
Mhm. Okay, so we're talking about games then that you can turn into like session activities. What's an example that you've done in session with like a board game or a card game that isn't normally used for that, but that you've been able to turn into a session activity?
That's a hard one because I've used a lot, but it's not, I wouldn't necessarily say a session activity, but I've recently discovered, I never played this game as a kid and I'm not sure like how I rediscovered it, but the game Mousetrap is like,
Uh-huh.
it's just because like the motive is
Best
like,
game.
the
I
motive
never
is
played
to
it as
like,
a kid either though, but as an adult and
yeah,
yes,
it's
I
like
have.
I always wanted
revamp.
it as a kid, and I
Same.
never, like, I saw the commercial all the time as a kid, and I was like, I want that. Never did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that one in general is just like, I mean, it's strategic, but it's like problem solving skills, because like obviously depending on where you put your mouse, like it's not going to get in the trap, and just like setting it up is like a whole nother, that takes forever, number one. But
Yeah.
setting it up, like that's a way for them to problem solve. Like they're problem solving how to put components of things together, and in their everyday life they're problem solving how to put things together that don't make sense. And so Uno, like you said, I mean, that one in general, because of the four colors, like those go with the, I always never remember what they're called, but the four stages of emotions, like your happiness is green, your sadness is blue, your fear is yellow, and your anger is red. And so when I first started BHIS and did my shadowing sessions, she made it where, you know, when you lay a red card, like you tell a time when you were angry or something that makes you angry. And so you're still playing Uno, but you've just revamped it into an activity, you know. And so yeah, I was gonna say I also have it's sequence, but it's number sequence. So they've added math equations into it, which is great. But most of my kids, like when they first saw it, they were like, no, I don't like math. And I was like, just hear me out. Like it's not hard math. And now like that's the most requested game ever. And again, that's problem solving, and not that our kids have like school goal, you know, but like, I mean, you're working on math, but you're also doing something fun. And so you're doing two things for the price of one. And so now that's like their most requested, like, do you have that game? And now I just have like a tote of games in the trunk of my car. So I just, you know, drive around with them.
Oh, yeah.
When I was doing BHIS, my trunk of my car looked like a toy store.
Same.
Like it just like you'd hit the button, hatch would come up, and it would just be like all games and toys.
Yeah.
Like Jenga would always like spill all over my backseat. Don't bring Jenga with you. It never stayed in the box. But
I was gonna say I have Jenga, but I have it in a bag. Like I have it in a Ziploc bag. But that's another one where you can find colored Jenga blocks or write numbers on them, but you can find questions on the internet that associate with whatever number you pull. And so I have a color Jenga that comes with a dice. So you roll the dice, and that's what color Jenga block you have to pull. And then that has a number on it. And I use that for like the get to know you, like the first couple sessions or whatever, just because the questions are like, you know, what are three things you would take on a deserted island? Or if you had a restaurant, what foods would you have? Like they're definitely like extraordinary questions, but they're a conversation piece.
Yeah, that's really cool.
That emotions Uno always reminds me of Inside Out.
Yeah.
Yes.
And because Joy is yellow, right? And the red
She's
one,
greenish yellow.
okay. And then
Yeah.
like the red one is anger. Right?
Yep.
And sadness is blue. Yeah.
Sadness is blue.
So cute.
You guys, sadness is my favorite one, I have to say.
Yeah.
When she's like, when Joy is like dragging her down the corridor because she's so too exhausted to go, and then like she's touching all the memories along.
I like that movie in general.
It's my
Yes,
favorite.
it's a great
Yeah.
movie too in general too.
We used to do Inside Out bingo. I don't know if you guys still do that, but that was always fun. Because it was like each of the characters was a bingo on the top, and then you had to do different emotions for each of the squares. It's pretty cool.
I have like an Inside Out board game that I found that's just like on an 8x10
Ooh.
piece of paper that I laminated. I think it's in our resource file if I'm not mistaken, but it's the same concept. Like you roll a dice and you pick your pawns or whatever, and then like when you land on a purple, which I think is like silly, or pink or whatever, like you tell a time that you felt silly or something that makes you feel silly. And so worst case scenario, like that's just in my little binder thing. And but I also have like an Inside Out sheet of different emotions that are, you know, because more than just angry, like there's other feelings associated with being angry. And so just kind of that reminder that like there's all these other feelings within those emotions.
Definitely.
Gosh, I wish BHIS was a thing when I was a kid.
Same.
Like I hear all these sessions all the time and I go, oh my gosh, I wish I could do that when I was in second grade or third grade. I would have loved BHIS.
Yeah.
So we've got your quote here, and I love this quote. It says, you can't wait until life isn't hard anymore before you decide to be happy. And that is beautiful. Where does that quote come from?
So I actually, so there was a couple years ago, there was a girl that had performed on, I want to say it was X Factor, and she had cancer and actually just passed away a few months ago. But that was like her, that was her quote, like that came from her, and that was when she, they were like, "Why are you focusing on singing like when you're practically dying, like you're on the verge of dying?" And she just, made the comment that like you can't just wait until things are okay, like to be happy. Like you have to continue going even when you feel not okay. Like, and it just, when I saw that, and then like even knowing like she passed away, I was like, oh my gosh, like it really stuck with me. And I literally just instantly like wrote it in my phone. And that's just kind of been like a constant reminder that like it's okay to not be okay, but you still deserve to be happy.
Yeah, I love that.
I love that. Nightbird, right?
Yep.
Nightbird. Oh,
She's
beautiful,
got a
beautiful,
very, I was gonna say, she's got a very pretty voice too.
gorgeous. I remember that audition.
Hmm.
And like Simon was crying.
Yeah.
And
I
when
think,
she
I feel like she got, I want to say she got the
golden
golden
buzzer.
buzzer. Yeah. Yep.
Yes. Oh, I remember. Oh, how beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the quote really speaks to, and I think her story
Hmm.
really speaks to kind of this addiction that I think is kind of prevalent in society right now, which is this destination addiction, right? Destination focus. And when I have this, I'll be happy, or when this changes, I'll be happy, or if I go do this, or accomplish this, or buy this, or have this, or, or go to this place, then I'll be happy. Or when this, phase of life is over, then I'll be
Yep.
happy. And it becomes so prevalent, I think, that we don't always stop to think about it and to acknowledge that might be happening, and that might be contributing to some of our own unhappiness.
Right.
And I'll catch myself in that cycle sometimes, right? And I'll go, I've got a young child, which is a difficult phase of life. And so I'll sometimes catch myself being like, oh, when she's older, like it'll be, my life will be more peaceful, right? Or I'll think like, when I was in school, you guys can relate to this. Like when I was in school and I was like, okay, when I'm done with school, like then my life is going to be more peaceful. That did not happen.
Right.
Like it didn't get less busy or better or and
Yeah.
but I'll catch myself doing that, and I think in some ways it's a coping skill, and so in some ways it's beneficial to us, right? In some ways it
Right.
can kind of help motivate us through a tough time, it can kind of help us get through. But when we kind of consistently do that and then complete the next thing and go, oh, that didn't make my life the way that I wanted it to be, right? I don't feel like I deserve to be happy yet, right? So now I've got to go do this next thing.
Yeah.
And maybe when I do that next thing, I'll feel like I deserve to be happy, or I'll feel like my life is good or complete.
Mhm.
And it's just this cycle that we can get into. And I think what Nightbird's quote really reminds us is that no, we're allowed to be happy right now. It is a decision
Yep.
to be happy. Our circumstances don't impact how we feel. Our
Yeah.
circumstances don't have to impact who we are, or how we act towards others, or what our thoughts are about our circumstances, right? Those are external things. But no matter what's happening, I mean, she was battling multiple cancers. Um,
Hmm.
and no matter what, she still got to choose who she was and
Yep.
how she coped with what was happening and what her feelings were going to be.
Yep.
And I just think that's so beautiful and such a great reminder for all of
I
us.
think I think oftentimes people get focused on like those big things, like you were saying, making them happy. But like even for me, and I've been guilty of that. I mean, I don't know who hasn't been guilty of that, but I often remind myself that like sometimes it's truly the little things, like your favorite song coming on in the car, or seeing a sunset, or somebody texting you something. Like there's little pieces that can make up your happiness too. But some people unfortunately don't know how to recognize that. And that took me a long time to realize that like just because things are bad or not going how I want them to go doesn't mean like I can't be happy by doing or experiencing other things. Like it's good for those things to happen, but it might not be tomorrow that it happens. So you just have to continue on where you're at and make changes as you see that fit.
It's the trampoline, right? It's like where as adults we get, and somehow sometimes like we lose that joy we had in childhood of like, I'm gonna do a trick on the trampoline. Come watch me
Right.
do this. Like there's such joy in
Yeah.
that.
Mhm.
And then as adults, we get into our lives and we get into our routines and all of our to-do lists and all of our stuff. And then and all of our grown-up identity, and all the stuff we're supposed to be and do. And then, it sometimes crowds out those, like you said, those little things like,
Mhm.
come watch me do a flip on the trampoline, right?
Right.
That is what life is about. Those are those joyful moments. And they sometimes get edged out by all the stuff that we're supposed to do.
Right.
So yeah, I love that. What a great quote, and what great words to live by. Gosh, I remember when she passed away. Because it
Yeah,
wasn't
that
that
wasn't
long
that long
ago.
ago. Uh-uh.
Wasn't that long ago. And it just, I think that she had made an impact on culture and pop culture initially. But I think when she passed, even more so, because it
Yeah.
it really, I think, highlighted the bravery and courage that she was demonstrating, not just in her physical actions, right, of going to treatment and going on this show. And I don't remember if it was X Factor or America's Got Talent, but it was one of
Yeah,
them.
something. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I just remember that Simon was crying, so it could have been either one. But not only in those actions, when we think about bravery, those are the things, but the bravery to be happy
Yeah.
amongst those circumstances is just so
Like she was
inspiring.
literally doing what she loved in the midst of like losing her life. I mean, her life could have been over any second. And, obviously, who doesn't want it? But she was aware that that's what was happening. Like she knew that's what was happening, but she still had a goal to be happy, to make her dreams come true, even if they were short lived.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Just kind of reminds us of how short it all is and how short it all can
Yeah.
be, even in the best of circumstances. And
Mhm.
and it's very honoring to her, that you would live your life by this way of living. I love it. I think it also acknowledges just that everybody does have challenges in their lives, and we sometimes we think that we either minimize our own challenges or we minimize other people's, right? And so there's a lot of minimizing of challenges that happens in our society, and either we compare ourselves to other people and we go, oh, I can't feel bad about these things, right? Because other people have it worse. Or
Yeah.
we see other people and we don't see their challenges, right? We just see their outcomes. We see their outputs. We see the things that are on the outside, and we can have a tendency to minimize those things. And I think what this way of living, this quote, really highlights is that we all do have them. It's an equalizer. We all
Yeah.
have these challenges, and especially mental health challenges. I think sometimes in our society there's this separation of people with mental health diagnoses and people who don't have them. And I'm like,
Mhm.
somewhat rare to see somebody who does not have one. Right?
Right.
Like honestly. um and and so this idea that no, we're all actually on a spectrum of mental health, and that sometimes we might be on the healthier side because we're working it, and sometimes we might be on the unhealthier side because we're going through something, but at any given time we're on this spectrum somewhere, just
Yeah.
like everybody else in the world. I think is so important. If you could give one suggestion to somebody who might be on the fence about starting counseling, what suggestion might you give them?
I just from personal experience, like to seek out and find whoever, I mean, even if it's uncomfortable, like that was my biggest
Mm,
challenge was it was uncomfortable. Like I didn't like change. I didn't want to find new. Like I wanted who I had. And I couldn't. And so I knew that personally, like I needed it, but I wasn't going to find it unless I reached out or, looked online or whatever the case may be. So do it if it makes you feel uncomfortable. And like, I need to take my own advice because even not in this situation, but some things are uncomfortable and everything's not meant to be comfortable, but it could honestly, like with counseling or anything, like it could be a great decision and sometimes it might be a bad decision, but just do it if it's uncomfortable. I mean, you're not going to know unless you try. And clearly that was my case. And now I found somebody who is a good fit for me. And that's great. But had I have not done my own research or, whatever the case may be, who knows where I would be right now.
I love that. I love that you acknowledge that it is uncomfortable. Like it's not natural for everybody to go into some stranger's office and answer a bunch of questions about your life and about who you are. It can feel very invasive. It can feel very scary. We're putting ourselves in a vulnerable
tell that story over and over and over again.
Absolutely. I mean, we're in a vulnerable position. We know what it felt like the last time we had to tell that story, and then we got through it, but now we got to do that again, right? And we don't know if we're going to get through it okay in the same way that we did before, because this is a totally different person. And so I love that you're acknowledging that, like, yes, it is uncomfortable. It is. Like, we can't sugarcoat it and say it's not awkward. It is awkward that first time. And sometimes it's awkward for like 2 or 3 months as you get to know somebody. And you might not trust that person at first, and it's okay to not trust them at first. You might never trust that person. If you don't, then that's not the person for you. Right.
Exactly.
So I love that you acknowledge that, like, no, it is awkward. Like it can be, it's not comfortable, but that it is worth it as long as we acknowledge, we give it the try, acknowledge if it isn't the right fit, we acknowledge that and we move forward, because that is the way that we're going to get to that person that we can build that sustainable relationship with.
Yeah.
I also love that you identified in your story that even in the situations where it didn't work out long term, that those were still beneficial experiences for you.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes our therapists go on maternity leave. Like sometimes our therapists move to a different state. They're humans just like we are. And that even if that happens, even if this isn't my therapist for the rest of my life, it's still a beneficial experience, or it can still be a beneficial experience while we're together.
Yeah. I'm Lexxis Onken and I need a counselor.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you. Me too. So does Chrissa. We all do. Everybody needs a counselor, honestly. Absolutely love it. And, I know we just did the sign off, but one other thing that I just love from this, I want to highlight, is that you talked about stopping seeing that counselor because you felt like things were going well, and then needing them again later. And I think that just really highlights the importance of just that consistency, even when things are going well, being able to have that relationship built up so that when we do need that person, we're right there with them. So
I just thought like, oh, I've gone to counseling, like I'm good to go and I don't need them no more. And that was not the case.
Love that. Yeah. It's like, if you go to the gym and you lose 50 pounds, then you're like, oh, good, I don't need to go to the gym anymore. Right? Like it's that same idea. It's like, no, I gotta go for the rest of my life.
Or like when you're taking antibiotics, like when you stop taking them because you feel better. And I'm guilty of that because I do it all the time. But you stop taking them because you feel better, but they're not exactly effective unless you take all of them.
Yep.
I love that analogy. That's a great one. We're going to use that again.
My mom reminds me of that every day. Like not every day, but every time I'm on antibiotics or something, take them all.
Awesome. So if you are in Iowa, give us a call at 800-531-4266. 836. If you are in the Cedar Rapids area and you have children and you'd like to get them signed up for some sessions with Lexxis, they sound like really, really fun sessions and very effective sessions. So give us a call there as well. Lexxis also offers telehealth sessions. So if you're in Iowa, you've got kiddos, but you're not in the Cedar Rapids location, that's okay. You can do sessions over the phone or over the computer.
And like Julie mentioned at the beginning, we post new episodes every Sunday at 5 p.m. Central. So save up that laundry or meal prepping or walking on your treadmill or whatever task you hate doing and listen to us at the same time that you're doing it. And we can help prep and prepare you to call a counselor or get set up with services that week as well. So if you have any questions for us or for Lexxis, you can reach out to You Need a Counselor Podcast on our Facebook page, or you can send us a DM at You Need a Counselor Podcast on Instagram as well. So I'm Chrissa Hunt.
And I'm Julie Johnson, and we need a counselor.
And so do you.
Bye.
Bye.